Now, I'm lucky enough to have been given special permission to see Montuhotep's soldiers for the first time. These guys are going to be taking down the tomb wall for me, allowing me to actually meet the very people who fought in Egypt's civil war around 2000 BC. So I am very, very excited.
And it was the same curiosity which drove a team of American archaeologists to excavate their original mass grave in the first place. Now reburied in a neighbouring tomb, the bodies of Montuhotep's soldiers have rarely seen the light of day since their discovery over 90 years ago.
كله تمام ولا؟
كله تمام. شكراً جزيلاً. شكراً. مية مية. Now, this is really, really super frustrating, but in the interests of health and safety, I can't go in there immediately, much as I really want to, because all the stale air's built up as the wall's being sealed, and we've really got to let this out with all the fungal spores and the bacteria and everything else that's so detrimental to health.
Early Egyptologists tended to rush straight in and risk the so-called Pharaoh's curse, so a little waiting is essential.
I can't believe we're actually going to enter this tomb now. It's one of those rare moments you get in a Egyptological career into a tomb that's hardly ever visited. The wall had to come down, and who knows what we're going to find inside, because I certainly have never seen this before, so it's a very, very special moment. This literally wasn't at all what I expected. Nobody knew what to expect. It's staggering. I've never, ever been into a tomb quite like this before. The mask is a very good idea because there's all sorts of things floating around in the atmosphere in here, not just the dust of ages, but the dust of human beings. And as such, we have to be very, very respectful.
It's a large rock-cut tomb, and although its walls are unfinished, it's typical of those created for courtiers and officials throughout these cliffs.
Wow, it's a mummified body. It's absolutely incredible. Oh, that's quite something. And if you look along the length of this very long tomb, look at the floor. This isn't stone. These are human remains and mummy wrappings. And there are chambers and corridors leading off, again full of wrappings, the linen of ages.
Some of it is claimed to be the very linen that bound the bodies of Montuhotep's warriors to help preserve them for eternity. But at first glance, it's hard to get a clear picture, for this particular tomb seems to have been reused many times during Egypt's long history.
Part of a shoulder. You see the way the skin's folded and dried out. Partial human body, still with much of its soft tissue intact. It hits you immediately in the face, and you're confronted with what a tomb is all about. Make no mistake, this is the home of the dead, and we're in amongst them. It's a very, very emotive and powerful place to be.
But what's striking is how little is left of their bodies. Like many other tombs up and down the Nile, they've been subjected to centuries of looting and damage.
And amongst all these linen wrappings and debris and the human remains themselves are the tangible remains of these men who died so bravely in their efforts to reunify Egypt for Montuhotep, their leader. Having just come out of that tomb, I have very, very mixed emotions. I don't really know what I was expecting to see. Certainly some of Montahotep's soldiers. Perhaps some of them were. It's highly likely. Essentially, what we're looking at are the ancient Egyptians themselves. These are the ancient Egyptians. Temples, tombs, pyramids, this wonderful culture. It's all well and good studying these esoteric aspects that are distinct and marvellous and grand, but when it comes down to it, the things we should really be interested in are these people.
Montahotep's reunification of Egypt marked a new beginning, the dawn of what would become known as the Middle Kingdom. And the rise of Thebes. Montahotep made it the new spiritual heart of Egypt. And it would stay that way for the next 2,000 years. But whereas the war god Montu had dominated the previous century of Egypt's story, the deity that now took centre stage was Hathor, the goddess of love, joy, beauty, and motherhood. The goddess whose origins can be traced right back to the earliest of times. And believing that Hathor dwelt in the cliffs of Deir el-Bahri, Montahotep chose this site not only for his war cemetery, but for his own tomb complex.
It was Montahotep that first built here, in this dramatic place where the cliffs meet the desert. Believed to be the home of the goddess Hathor herself, it was a fast track to the afterlife. And for Montahotep and his men, who'd lived and died by the war god Montu, they all now rest in the eternal embrace of Hathor.
The first to build at Deir el-Bahri was Montahotep, the founder of a reunified Egypt. He was so influential that almost 600 years later, female pharaoh Hatshepsut built her own funerary temple right next door to tap into the religious and political power of her illustrious predecessor.